No actual podcast, just 10 1-minute bangers. And we'll just edit it and use that.
Yeah, retreat's coming up. Starts on, so today's the 21st of September. It starts, first day is October 7th. So check in. A couple people that are going again that from last year's retreat, Aaron and Big Tom, who I'm actually meeting tonight. I don't know if you remember them. Justin Peters, obviously. Jay, obviously. Bardia, Julian.
Oh, cool.
There's a couple others that I'm missing their names at the top of my head that are joining again that were there. He's a father and a baseball scout.
Oh, yeah. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I'm just totally forgetting his name. But yeah, it's coming up, and I just got done with a 3-day fast, and that's the longest I've done a fast, and it was legit nothing but water. No salt, no coffee, nothing.
No electrolytes?
Nothing. Straight water, man. It was challenging, and I was so ready to eat last night. I had dinner, and I went to this Italian restaurant that I love. It's called Red Ash. I don't know if you've ever been there in Austin, but great food. They're always booked and packed, and I would advise to myself and to others to slowly eat your first meal back, and it should be healthy gut microbiome foods. I had meatballs and burrata, which is not that bad, right? It's all whole foods, but then I had pasta and a little bit of dessert, and it was like, I just felt so lethargic after. But it was like the best meal, one of the best meals of my life. It's like so good. But the 3-day fast wasn't even, it didn't initiate. It's funny because I've been setting intentions, and as the retreat approaches, for me, emotions are coming up similar to the STW. I'm feeling strong emotions, interesting attachments, and I've been praying and having intentions for this retreat, and it definitely is revolving around past challenges that I've had that I've also brought to other ceremonies, and I think it's going to be a continuation of what I was experiencing and healing from the STW in February with you and Scott and Jay in Ashland, Oregon. It was such a beautiful STW. So it's STW stands for anybody that's listening, Self-Transformation Works. And it is a 3-day experience with ayahuasca in the Santo Daime. And the Santo Daime is the ayahuasca spirituality lineage that myself, Brandon, and a few others have been immersing into. And it's been a profound experience for me. And, to stay on topic, I have such a special place in my heart for the Daime. And, this 3-day fast helped ground me, and the strong attachment and like this infatuation that I was feeling, and with this one girl that's in the local community here in Austin, and other strong emotions that have been coming to the surface from different maybe experiences that I've had, or parts of my ego, my identity that I've been trying to heal and let go. And the fasting has helped ground me and detach from that and really separate from that, because I'm just so hungry, right? Like the only thing that I desire is food. And but there's a lot of mental clarity and sharpness that comes from not having anything to eat. And I could have probably done more than 3 days, but it was initiated by the fasting. I did it with a couple of guys, Harry from the Meat Mafia, and a buddy of mine. His name's Lance. Harry's got a Tuesday like discipleship he's been following the Christian faith for some time now and does a men's group discipleship every Tuesday morning. We do like a 3-mile run. It's called The First Appointment. And then we read different books. I've just been going for 3 weeks, so we're on one book now, but it's around Christ and his wisdom and yeah, I was like praying because I was kind of going through these tumultuous emotions as it seems to occur before every ayahuasca retreat or ceremonies that I'm about to immerse into. And I was praying for some answers and from God and for his, like for help or just for some understanding and wisdom. And like the next day that morning at Harry's, men's group, they were like, let's do a 3-day fast. And I was like, okay. And immersed into that, did that. And yeah, I'm still reflecting on it because it just ended. But it's grounding. It also helps with resisting temptation with various different things. Like your phone, like constantly scroll, like just making a habit of scrolling or eating like shit or whatever. And even just your thoughts. Sometimes I can constantly think you ever wake up in the morning and you're like dozing off and then waking up, dozing off of it. You can just tell your mind just going. Mm-hmm. That I believe is something you can train. That's a part of your brain where you're just always thinking and utilizing that cerebral muscle to just keep going. So yeah, lots of lessons in that, but the fast is now over. I might do another one before this retreat, but nice. Yeah, it's coming up and it's been I'm really excited. Some of the men in the October retreat are, one gentleman's doing a 7-day fast, and Justin Peters might want to do another one before.
A 7-day fast?
Yeah, this gentleman did a 7-day fast. I think it ends today for him. So God bless.
Preparing for the retreat?
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
So, but yeah, man, just about a year ago, you were with us on that Austin ranch, and I think I was looking at, I was listening to our podcast episode together. I posted it in July of 2023, but we probably recorded in July of 2023. And it's been a beautiful journey of friendship and spiritual exploration and curiosity. And I've said to you a couple times, and I've said to some friends, how I'm inspired by your ability to follow your intuition, exploring this spiritual path in a way that you're plunging into it. Mm-hmm. At the beginning of the podcast that we recorded, our first one, you were saying how you're from Georgia, then you've been in Florida, you've been in New York, you were in California, then you were in Austin, now you're in Brazil. You've been in Brazil for some time now, and we met at Hutch's backyard social event, and that's where we kind of connected and realized that Julian was going to the retreat, and this moment that we had was like, oh, there's this ayahuasca Santo Daime retreat in Austin, and we connected and talked, and then eventually you signed up, and you've been exploring the medicine for some time, man. And it's it's something that not a lot of people do. I mean, you're younger, but I think it'd be more difficult for someone that has kids and a family and whatnot. But it's exciting to hear about your journey, and I always look forward to our calls. And I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I know it's going to be special, and it's going to be cool to hear how your experience in Brazil has been so far.
Awesome, brother. Always good to be with you. I'm excited too. Thank you for that reflection. It's been a wild year.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's been a while. So since October. When did you originally go to Brazil?
I first came to Brazil in January. So January 5th or 6th, I flew here and stayed here for 4 weeks. And during those 4 weeks, I realized I was going to move here. But I had to fly back to Austin and move out of my apartment and move my car back to Florida and get a visa and all those things. So I was back in the United States from February to mid-April. And then mid-April is when I made my move to Brazil with a 2-year visa. So
it's been 5 months or so since you've been there, since April. And I'd like to give you the floor to discuss and reflect on anything that's on your heart to, or maybe just talk about, because, I wish I listened to our last episode or our first episode just to see where we left off. And we were talking about your leadership in somatic breathwork sessions.
Yeah, that was definitely a start for me.
Yeah, which is your first step as a leader in alternative methods of healing and somatic. So somatic breathwork was an experience for some people to be able to let go and move energy and emotions in a way that's maybe not possible in traditional talk therapy or other methods. And we were discussing that in the last episode. I would love to just hear how life has unfolded since the October retreat, how your relationship to, and maybe for anybody that hasn't listened to the last episode, if you want to talk about and provide like a brief introduction of, where like how things unfolded for the retreat and then thereafter with your path overall.
Yeah, man, it's interesting to reflect on it because my life has completely changed in the past year. So it's almost going back to a year ago, Brandon, and talking about him. It's like I barely know him now. I've grown so much, and Brazil, obviously a new country, and really new life with the medicine. So we did ayahuasca together last October. And before that, I actually left my job. So, we did the podcast in July, and I ended up leaving my job right before the retreat for a variety of reasons. But I had money saved up for about 18 months. And kind of like what we were talking about, the spiritual path, I didn't have any responsibilities financially for anybody else other than myself. So I wasn't in a relationship with a woman. I didn't have a long-term rent. I don't have any kids. I don't have any debt. And I had 18 months of savings in cash, and I just was really unhappy with my job. And it just was praying on it, meditating on it, listening as I always try to life, the circumstances, events, and the people around me. And it felt like it was time to go. And so I went before I went on the retreat without knowing at all that ayahuasca was about to become the primary pillar of my life. The medicine ayahuasca, I didn't really want to do it in October. It took a lot of, synchronicity for me to say yes. And obviously I did some healing work with somatic breathwork and other things as well. So I was dedicated to my growth and self-discovery at that time. But ayahuasca, from what I had seen in the mainstream and the podcast and everything like that, it just wasn't really all that attractive to me. We listened to all these mainstream podcasts. Oh no. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it broke up for a second.
Okay, we can keep going. So I listened to all these mainstream podcasts. And a lot of the times they would kind of talk about their kind of crazy experiences, but I didn't, when I was kind of, studying them, just kind of seeing how they were and what they contributed to the world. it seemed a little bit off center for me. That was my opinion of it.
Are you saying the podcasts that you're referring to were those on ayahuasca or just
people talking about their experiences? And then if you go to YouTube right now and you talk about ayahuasca, or you type in ayahuasca, you just have these kind of crazy Amazon retreats. And when I look at the people and what they were getting from them, it was like they were more confused after the experience than before it. And it was just the mainstream availability of ayahuasca, because it's just now kind of coming to North America. And we don't really have the society. We don't have the emotional intelligence. We don't have the spiritual culture for a medicine as powerful as ayahuasca. Obviously, with indigenous cultures and other things in Brazil, it's fairly natural. But as ayahuasca showed me the first time I drank it, it said, "You have no idea what I am." And that was right. So everything I just told you, I was completely wrong. And that's why I would just open up. I was completely wrong. And everything I thought it was, because of the media I consumed, because of the people I knew at the time, I was wrong, point blank, about what it was, its impact, and everything like that. The medicine can show you how silly your opinions are, which is a superpower, because everyone thinks their opinions are so fucking great, and they're not, mine included, right? And we all do our best with our opinions, some better than others, but and then obviously at the retreat, being around a whole bunch of people that are really just trying to get the most out of life, right? Entrepreneurs, seekers, people really trying to discover themselves and really trying to move past things and just trying to live a better life. That's what I saw that October retreat. And then, many, many stories after that. But since that retreat in October, that was when I decided I was going to go to Brazil. And things just started kind of working out for me since then, just kind of followed the path that was kind of being open to me after that retreat. Mm. But that just kind of describes that first experience and leading up to it. I mean, I really had no idea. I literally had zero idea. I thought that I would never drink it again after those 3 days. I didn't know what it was, right? And I kind of just wanted to get on with my life and do something else. Or that's what I thought. And then I had opened my life for this specifically, without my knowing at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing all of that. And, to your comment of how you said you didn't even really want to do it, or you weren't really motivated to do it in October. And before that, I remember when we first met, I think Julian was your mentor at the time. You were doing a one-on-one mentorship with him, and he may have brought up that retreat in ayahuasca, and you just didn't feel called to it. But you had...
Yeah, I said no immediately. It wasn't, it didn't even get past my initial barrier. It was just no.
And then we met, and that's where I expressed at that social gathering, I was like, yep, I've done ayahuasca for the first time in March of 2023, and I'm doing it for a second time in October. It's been this powerful, immense, ineffable experience that I can't even put words to, but it has invigorated me to do it again. And that's where we connected, and you were like, this is interesting. It's like, I said no, but I met this guy named Shane who was going to this retreat. And then I think you were invited by Hutch to go to Jay's park workout, and Jay's running the retreat. And you're like, okay, this is the second time where organically I'm running into situations that seem to kind of be calling me to potentially say yes to this retreat. I don't know if that's inaccurate.
Absolutely. At that time, I've been very spiritual for many, many years, but at that time I had already kind of lost the belief that things just kind of happen by accident. Right. And so when I went to Hutch's place, I had never even met Hutch before. That was my first time there. I was around 10 people I didn't even know. Right. And then that's when that came up. And so that's why it kind of, or the retreat came up again at a place I had never been to, around people I had never known prior. So it was that type of interaction that caused me to really kind of, be confused, look at this, a little more closely. And then, 2 weeks later, I met the guy who runs the retreat, Jay. And then that's when I really kind of prayed on it. So it was, those 3 events came into my life. And then I decided to actually take this seriously, right? And then start meditating and praying on it and seeing if it was something that I wanted to do, or should do, not wanted to do. But is this something that am I supposed to do? Is this something that's part of my path? Because I don't want to do it. But if this is coming in front of me for a reason specifically, I don't want to back away from it either, right? That's why we do, the cold baths. We do all these things that we don't want to do, because sometimes you don't want to do it, but it's something that maybe a higher calling, a higher purpose, that's something that you should do in that regard. So I just took it to my heart. I prayed, I meditated on it. And the answers I received back, just how I was feeling was something I was supposed to do. And so I did it.
Woo! Yep. I'm glad you were there, man. And I want to get into the retreat a little bit, just to maybe go back and see what comes to mind from our memories. But it's been an interesting journey since then, right? I'm very excited to get back into the medicine, and I've recently been going to church, like Bible church, Christianity, surrounding myself with men and women that are in that faith. And sometimes I feel a little bit of resistance to mention, like, oh, well, the beginnings of my spiritual exploration, or at least the massive invigoration, was prompted by ayahuasca, because some people might be, unfortunately, closed-minded to that, or think it's maybe some dark magic or something. And that's okay if people think that at the end of the day. But, that's somewhat of a quick judgment, I believe, but anyways, I've immersed myself into church and reading the Bible and learning about Christ, because ever since I've done these, I've done 3 total retreats, and I'm doing this 4th one. The medicine has shown me that, that God exists, right? Like, I don't know if I ever said that God didn't exist in my life. I don't think I was ever an atheist, but I never really had
and probably didn't think about it, right?
Just didn't think about it. And so it was very difficult for me to ignore that. And as time progressed, and I was still carrying onwards with decent habits of, virtue, there were still some vices of, like, through creating this podcast and being on my phone way too much, what really does pull you in, and it can drain you, and you can lose sight of who you are and what you're meant to do, and clarity. And so having some form of spiritual discipline and a community and integration wasn't something that I formulated and put into my life after these retreats, maybe for a little bit right after. But that's why I've been going to church. But I'm definitely not closing myself off to the daime. I feel called to, every time I've done it, I feel like the medicine is working with me, and the relationship that I established with it is so powerful and so beautiful, but overwhelming. And it's, I've said every time that I walk out of that as a stronger man, and I know myself better. And there's this connection with God that I've never been able to establish other than through the medicine. And I'm not saying that you have to always utilize, like, that's the only way, right? But so anyways, yeah.
It's not the only way, but it is a way.
It is definitely a way. and I've had a podcast with this girl, and she was saying, like, some people will say it's like, it's just a tool. You don't even really need that. You just need Jesus. And I'm like, okay. I mean,
has she ever done it before?
No. Well, actually, My guess is no. My guess is no. I don't know. I don't know for sure. But so that was interesting. And so there's an internal conflict within myself because I'm going to church with some friends and community, but I also feel called to continue to do the medicine in October, obviously, but most likely in the future. I have this relationship that feels really good in my heart. It feels like it brings peace and light. And despite what other people might say, it's like, oh, that's, your spiritual bypassing, or, it's not a structured thing. And I get that. But anyways, I'm kind of explaining where I'm currently at because I want to be careful with like continuing my spiritual path and establishing discipline and this somewhat like discipleship or focus with Christ has been beautiful. But I also want to be mindful of the dogma and maybe the narrow-mindedness that can come with the Christianity customs and social aspect, if that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. But what I was saying before was maybe getting into the October retreat. And I had posted a video, I think it was like a couple weeks after, and I had said it was one of the best weeks of my life. And I'll never forget it. And the feelings that I had were feelings of harmony, love, peace, laughter, deep and truthful and genuine connection with other people around us. Like we were all there doing the work of entering into these sacred ceremonies, ingesting the daime or ayahuasca, and immersing into these experiences that can be challenging, but also beautiful. And I have a lot of admiration and respect for everybody that was in there, doing that. And it was something that I walked out of just so in love with life. I had a bigger appreciation for the human experience. And yeah, it was such a great retreat that Jay led. And that, I try to be mindful of the privacy of the people that hold like their names, but I'll just say, I don't think it matters that much, but Kevin, like the way that he holds the space is incredible as well. And when I was there, the first ceremony was pretty, like it was a blast off for me. I remember there were at least a couple hours where I couldn't even really move. I was like on my back and closing my eyes, hands on my chest, my stomach. And it felt as if this higher power was obviously present. And, as the daime explains, there's the current, this flow of everyone that's in that ceremonial space. Once it is beginning, once it begins, and everybody ingests the daime, there's you can feel this current, like you can kind of feel it all together, and this current, I guess you could describe it as like what feels as if you're in a spiritual plane, if that makes sense. I don't know if that description, how you would describe it, but I couldn't help but just lay back and allow whatever was there to show me what I needed to see. But at times it was so overwhelmingly so overstimulating too for me. And the visuals that the Mirasaos, the people in the Central Daime, they talk about Mirasaos, which is essentially the visionary experiences that you see within your mind's eye. for me, they were so overwhelmingly powerful at moments where it was like my nervous system shut down and was like, close your eyes, rest, and experience it. And there's a part in here. So I've got the book Liquid Light that we both were reading right after the retreat, where the author describes, is one that I just read, and he says, when I'm able to relax, open, say yes within myself, the hell realm of non-specific suffering that I had previously been experiencing will disappear, and the same force that I had previously attempted to repel will all of a sudden be welcomed by every cell of my body. So there's a lesson in stillness and meditation, and the medicine seems to work with you when you don't try to push back and control and whatnot. So I'll stop there and I'll let you maybe reflect on your experiences, because I'm still kind of bringing to the top of my mind what else I experienced, but I kind of want to hear what you went through since it was your first time drinking. Like that first ceremony of that retreat was not my first time, but I know it was
Mm-hmm.
your first time taking it.
Yeah. Specifically with that retreat, which I've done it many times now. I mean, probably around 40 times. That specifically was, I received a lot deeper healing than one I even knew that I had. And it was really, wow, I would describe it cleaning me out just for service, cleaning me out for this journey that I didn't even know I was about to go on. And for me, I was learning very, very big lessons on self-love. There was three ceremonies, and basically I had a curriculum, a lesson on each one. The first one was self-love. The second one was fear. Third one was resentment. I haven't thought about it for a while, so that's why. So I was getting specific curriculums on those three things: self-love, fear, and resentment. And the way I described the experience, at least for me, right, just because of my prayers and my intention and a lot of things that we don't know about, right? You could talk about destiny. You can talk about a lot of things, right? But I describe it as, for example, the first night when my guides, my higher self, the medicine, whatever it is that's actually putting together the experience, right, is because a lot of people talk about ayahuasca being this sort of being, right, this sort of consciousness. That's not necessarily clear to me at this point, right? It's definitely a vehicle for what I would describe all of spirit to work through. So it's not just necessarily one thing. It could be many things, right? And it's all of spirit. And maybe there's this overarching being that can somehow, with that much intelligence and that much power and that much force, be able to do all of that. But the multiplicity of consciousness in the experience, to me, shows that it's probably not just one thing. And I actually asked this to the medicine one time, and this is also the reason why I think this way. But so, for example, the first night, self-love.
Oh, you're breaking up. I'm just going to say that now, just so that
I'm showing that I'm good.
But we'll wait until you come back. All right,
so the first night, I'll just pick back up, and you can edit it.
Yeah.
So the first night on self-love, I was put through, I guess, what you would consider this sort of metaphysical container. It's not necessarily a container like a maze, but that's how I describe it, because it's not like you're actually moving through something. But there's so many sensations and so many things happening in your body and your mind and your emotions. And basically, I felt completely dark and black on the inside. Just completely dark and black. And I felt awful. And with that feeling, a lot of thoughts came in my head, like, I just ruined myself, for example, is one. Like, I didn't necessarily want to do this. Now I'm doing it. And now I just made myself worse, and I've done so much work for my mind, body, health, soul, whatever. And I just absolutely ruined it all, That actually was a thought that came in that experience, right? Because I had this overarching emptiness in me. And this emptiness was so strong, it was unbearable. I mean, imagine this loneliness, this abandonment. Imagine as lonely and abandoned as you could possibly feel. That was me in that moment. And then, I don't know how long, probably 30, 45 minutes of feeling that way. I felt this light start radiating me, almost like the sun. So imagine you were in the dark, and sitting outside in the complete dark, and then somehow the sun was now out, and you felt this rays hitting you. How good that would feel. It would feel amazing, right? And so then I was welcoming this light that was, because I was feeling so bad, and I felt this glow, and I was like, man, this feels so good. And it's not necessarily clear how you intuit these things, but what I understood in that experience was that was actually me, another aspect of myself that was sending me love. So I was sitting there in a completely dark, abandoned, lonely state, and another part of me was sending me love. So I knew experientially that loving yourself is actually a real process. And what the medicine was showing me, how much I did not love myself and I didn't like myself, and how the medicine would do that in a very vivid ways. A lot of times it would just throw you right in there. And this is what you're doing to yourself in a way more amplified, in a way more intense experience, so you don't forget it. Right. And that's the gift of it. And then, so I learned that I could love myself. I knew the fact, because the other thing, when someone says, I'm learning to love myself, there's a paradox there, right? You have the I am loving myself. And so you're talking about two different things, right, in one sentence. And we use this in our language all the time. We don't necessarily think anything of it. But I understood that there was another part of me that existed that was capable of loving and taking care of myself here, and that I could do that, and I could somehow call that experience in and say, I can actually love myself. And I do love myself. So that was an experience on that first night. And then the other nights are very similar, very, very different, but similar in terms of, Brandon's really afraid of speaking his truth. Brandon's really afraid of this kind of healer, this kind of alternative therapies that are starting to naturally emerge out of him. And he doesn't want to own it because he doesn't think, society will accept it, or people will think it's weird or whatever like that, right? So he's actually deeply afraid of his gift. So we're going to, show him that, right? You show him that I experienced a ton of fear, and I experienced why I experienced the fear, and a whole bunch of things. So that was my experience with those 3 days, was basically just getting really, really difficult, really difficult. I mean, I had really, really difficult three days. And that's, the best gift is when, the medicine, whatever those processes, know that you're ready for something difficult, that you're ready for some hard truths, that you're ready, right? Because, one of the shamans here in Brazil, right, have no fear. And if it is showing you something really, really hard, that's actually the best gift, because it's giving you an opportunity to let go of something that you're deeply afraid of. It's giving you the opportunity to actually get past something that had really, really weighs you down. So like a lot of people talk about the darkness of ayahuasca. And my answer to that is the darkness is you, right? I mean, it can't show you something that is not already a part of you. And, I actually had this experience with this guy here in Brazil, because after the experience, he was terrified. He had done it 6 or 7 times. He was terrified because I think the first 5 or 6, it was all light and love. Man, this man just had this boom. Every time he left, he was just ready. That was so cool, And the 7th time, he was like, whoa, like this is the demons and the dark side that people talk about. And so I checked in with him a couple of days later, and he was, just trying to help him with this integration aspect. And then he actually reached out to me 3 weeks after that. And he was so fired up because he got it, because that darkness, because he didn't quite know what he was telling about, but it was like some anger he had with his father. right? And so, but when you're having the experience, you can't really necessarily know what it is at the time. It can be so complex and it's so emotionally vivid, right? Overwhelming that you're not very clear. And so I talked to him 3 weeks later, and like he was like, he understood the experiences, and he was like, you know what, man, I actually wasn't taking care of myself before that ceremony. The other 6 ceremonies, I had a dieta, I stayed off my phone for a few days, blah blah blah. And in his own words, before that ceremony, I was a complete shithead. I was eating whatever I wanted. I think he was, having, sex with some random woman the night before or something like that. And he walked in the ceremony, he just got, it was a lot darker than the other experiences. And once he integrated that experience, understood it, he was extremely happy about it. So yeah, just a little about the darkness aspect. It's just, that darkness is a part of you. Just like those dark experiences I had the first time, that was myself. That was my own hate that I had for myself. That was my own, lack of love I had for myself. And it was showing me that. And my experience at the time was, this is very dark. This is medicine of the light. This is demonic or something, right? But it wasn't, it was just a part of me that I was being shown to move past it, right? So then I could actually learn how to put light there instead of darkness. I could learn how to love myself and not to hate myself.
Yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of moments immersed into ceremonies where I'm just for multiple hours viscerally feeling dense, dark emotions.
Yeah.
I like how you described how
I describe it as the way up. So it's a lot of times, like when you take off on a plane, right before you get to cruising altitude, you a little bit of shakes. Everyone's got to keep their seatbelt on. And then you get above the clouds, and it's like, wow, everything's tranquil, everything's nice. The medicine works exactly like that as well, because it's taking you to another vibration. It's taking you to another state. And so on the way up, from the density of this experience that we have, as human beings here on Earth, and perhaps, other things that individually that we are carrying, it is trying to take us to these lessons, right? It can't show you light and love if you don't resonate with light and love. And so it's trying to get you there. And it's just like, getting to 30,000 feet on the airplane, it might take 20 minutes. And for some people, and sometimes when you're flying, everything's moving around. Other times it's not too bad, and you get up to cruising altitude, and then you're hanging out. So the medicine works in the same exact way.
Yep, it has for me. And there's a gentleman that I had a podcast conversation with. His name is Stephen Young, and I like how he carefully chooses the words that he uses, and not being so attached to specific terminologies. One terminology that a lot of people will bring forth when they do ayahuasca is like they have their dark night of the soul or something like that. Maybe not even just ayahuasca, but it's like a spiritual journey where all of a sudden you're having a period of time in which you're just feeling dense emotions that don't feel good. And
you're talking about afterwards.
It could be afterwards. It could be during. Yeah, it could be during or afterwards. Some people go and think they're going to have this magical moment, and they might, but then afterward, I don't know. I mean, it depends. Everybody's experience is very unique and very different. Yeah. So it could be both like beautiful and dark in the midst of the ceremonies. And then when they go out back to the real world, or just back into their regular daily way of living, they then have even maybe, this dark night of the soul. The gentleman that I referred to, Stephen, who I spoke to on my podcast,
I remember that podcast.
He was careful to say that. He's like, I don't usually say that because that's like placing a label on he's just careful about how he uses labels that society typically uses. And I like,
dark night of the soul. Yeah.
Night of the soul. He's just like, well, it's like that.
It's gotten more common, but it is also very, very real. It's gotten more common as a label, as you said, especially, in today's modern spiritual communities, which is great. People want to to talk about these things, to understand themselves. But, dark night of the soul then gets kind of planted onto maybe someone who's just, not happy for a few months or something like that, right? Whereas dark night of the soul is a very serious spiritual process.
Yeah, it can be.
For example, his this lady that he was talking about, she just left her house apparently without telling anybody. I don't know if she had a relationship or a family, but she had just basically just dropped all of her responsibilities.
Yeah.
And this is why Jonathan, he makes you promise that you don't make any changes for 90 days afterwards. And for me, that's also why it's important to do the pre-work, right? And that people have some sort of spiritual knowledge before they go into these things, or some sort of self-knowledge, right? I mean, what I would want to look for if someone is asking to me or talking to me about doing a ceremony for the first time is how self-aware is this person, right? I mean, do they have they actually looked into their past? Have they done any alternative healing? Do they have any spiritual practice? Or are they a person that is, just to be completely honest, completely unconscious? They live their whole life externally based on society structures and stuff like that. And they actually don't have a sense of self. And that's actually a very real thing. I mean, you'll talk to people and it's like, there's just words and stuff coming out, but there's actually no volition or heart coming from what they're saying. It's like, you're not actually talking to that person's soul is actually not present.
Broke up. Okay.
It's not too bad though. It's not too bad. So hopefully you can edit all this stuff out. Yeah. So but when someone's talking with you and you can't really feel them there, right? It's like they're just repeating stuff they've heard and you just know it. But they can live their entire lives like that, right? Because we live in a society where people actually don't have to do much. You just have to make money and then everything else is taken care of, right? I mean, your food, your lights, your housing, your shelter, you actually don't have to think about anything other than just make a basic living to pay for all of this, right? Which in today is actually a little bit more difficult than it was 30 years ago because of inflation and other modern issues. But for me, when I'm looking at it, if someone's actually talking to me about the medicine, talking about doing it, I look for these things. Do they have an ego? Do they have self-awareness? Do they have a spiritual practice? Are they an independent person, right? I mean, you can be 35 years old and not have any of these things.
When you said, do you have an ego? I mean, everybody has an ego, but do you mean like an inflated?
I meant individuation ego, right? So someone who's actually like separated themselves from their conditioning and all those things. Like,
right. Gotcha.
So that's what I mean by ego, because, and again, this kind of goes into Jungian psychology, but the ego doesn't by Jung's standard, he said doesn't fully develop until it's 30 years old. So where we all have egos, there's a big developmental process, and when it forms is different for everybody. It could be formed at 21, it could be formed at 28. And by ego, I mean, are they an individuated human being in their thoughts and their belief systems, and things like that.
Yeah, there was a few threads I wanted to pull on. I'm trying to remember.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, all three of my experiences were heart opening, also forgiving someone from my past, but I think that actually might have happened to more of an intense level at the STW. And all of my ceremonies for the most part have been pretty smooth. Like I'm not, the volatility is not crazy. Like I'm not having to get up and puking everywhere or shitting my pants or anything like that. And, but they're very intense. Every single one is intense. And the October retreat, I'm trying to remember exactly. I have my journal. I could actually go grab it. But a lot of it was just opening my heart. I feel like I've shielded my heart from people, but also on a romantic level. And that was just out of trying to protect myself when I was really young. And I learned to really open that up. And yeah, that was like the main lesson that I learned. And Yeah, I remember there's one moment. So the first ceremony, I was blown away by how immensely stimulating and powerful the daime, like the force of the medicine was. And the ceremony commenced, as it eventually does. And it had to be like, I don't know, 2 a.m. And everybody starts to like pack up and like try to, get up on their feet and go back to one of the facilities and eat a little bit and have some water. And for me, I was like, I went into the building inside and I didn't really talk to anybody, grabbed some food. I don't know if you remember, like you could go behind the counter. There's like a little counter and there was water in the corner and there's a light and a lamp. And when I was still in the force. So when I say the force, for anybody that's listening, it's like when you digest or ingest the medicine, the plant medicine, ayahuasca, there is this pulsating feeling that you eventually feel within your body. It's like every cell is transmuting into some state that you're immersing into a spiritual and conscious altering experience. And so I was still in the force after the ceremony and I was grabbing some, like a plate of food. And when I got close to a light, like an artificial light, like a lamp, I could see like fractals of energy in the atmosphere, like in the air. And my senses were so like heightened in a way. It's very hard to describe. And I eventually had to like eat and get out. It was like too overstimulating to be still in that state of consciousness and around a bunch of people inside of a room. And yeah, man, it lasted for another like 3 hours. Like I was still in it until like five in the morning. And, Kevin came up to me a couple of times and, but there was one interesting aspect. I was sharing a trailer with Julian and Bardia and I went in and I was like trying to go to bed and I went in and for some reason, this is what sticks to my mind. It's one thing that sticks to my mind from that first ceremony that night. And I got this just gross, dark feeling. It just was not good. It just was like, oh, it felt awful. And I was like trying to sleep it off and I couldn't. And all of a sudden my mind's eye started to see these, whatever it may be, like these beings or these different visuals of, I wouldn't say it's anthropomorphic, but it was just these weird, colorful structures and geometric patterns. And this voice within me was saying, we will show you what lust means. And I was like, whoa. So I got out of the trailer because it was just getting uncomfortable. And once I got outside, it felt better to take in a breath of air and then just look at the stars and take a deep breaths and just, it was like, is that why I'm still in this state? Like that's why I'm still like, this is still going on right now. You had to just say that one little last message before the first ceremony, ended. Or at least it was after the ceremony technically ended, but my experience overall. And that was interesting because I think being in America, I've written about this on a couple of Substack articles in the past and talked about it on on this podcast platform, and how when I was younger, I think a lot of modern Americans face the consequences of society's materialism and hedonism, and how we're on this pursuit of pleasure and attainment. And that was ingrained within me at a very young age. And unfortunately became somewhat lustful at certain phases in my life. And that was a very interesting, like just short glimpse of the first ceremony that I received, that like little message. But I can't describe how that darkness that I felt, like it was like, I mean, you were describing, you felt a little bit of darkness as well. And it's hard to put to words, but it's almost like a physiological, but mental,
well, darkness by nature has to be mental because it means it's not connected to the heart.
Okay.
Right. So hell in those mental planes, those darkness is always going to be in those, because if it had heart, it wouldn't be dark, right?
Yeah.
And that sounds like a, punchline, but it's a very real, energetic, spiritual thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the first one. And alongside the 3 ceremonies that we do, in between them, we do a sweat lodge. And was that your first sweat lodge?
Yep. And I have not done one since, not because anything happened. Yeah, okay. I've done it. I haven't. That was my only sweat lodge, and I haven't done one since. Not because anything. I actually really enjoyed it. I just haven't really had an opportunity to do it again. I thought it was obviously Native American traditions that would be considered a medicine. No different than ayahuasca. No different. Obviously, it's different than peyote, but they're all in the same category, right? As medicine. And I felt that with the sweat lodge. I mean, that sweat lodge was really, really hard. And honestly, like when you leave, you kind of have, a psychedelic experience. At least I did for 30 minutes. Like things look a lot different and things like that. So it was. I will do one again. It just depends when the opportunity comes.
Okay. Yeah. You froze a little bit there, but.
I know. I'm kind of picking back up. I
can tell you might be able to sense when it's picking back up. So a lodge is very difficult. 2 to 3 hours of being pretty much in a sauna with like 30 people, and come out of it with gasping for air. But
and man, dude, I was just as it's what I love about the medicine path, sweat lodge, and psychedelics, and I'm sure medicine can be a lot of different things, is that for me, it's the journey through fear. Because I was just as scared for that sweat lodge as anything, because I would go to the sauna for 20 minutes, right? And I would, try to push it to 25 minutes. And I would leave the sauna and my whole body would be red and I'd be sweating all over. And, I would have to go sit down for 15 minutes outside before I could drive home because, I was just, I won't say I was overheating, but I just needed to rest. It really took it out of me. And so then I was thinking about the sweat lodge like for 2 hours, and I was thinking about it for the month ahead, and I would keep going to the sauna, and I couldn't do more than 30 minutes every time, right? And I was like, man, like I'm really not going to be able to do the sweat lodge. Like I'm probably going to die. That's actually like I'm probably going to die because I do 30 minutes in the sauna, and I can't even speak for 30 minutes afterwards.
That sauna is different, though. The sauna.
I know, but the point I'm trying to make is that that's why you do those things, because we all have that voice of fear in our minds, and we don't know it's fear. And that's one of the best gifts that all of this has given me, is to realize the voice of fear. Because before you know what fear is, it just seems like a good idea in your mind. Right, it's a self-justification, or you're trying to take care of yourself, you're trying to protect yourself, and it seems like the smart thing to do, but it's really just fear.
Like rationalizing. Ever since that retreat, we then 4 months later went to Ashland, Oregon, and had an experience with a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Goldman. And this gentleman's like 70 years old or close to it, and has been in the Santo Daime, and taken ayahuasca for 30 plus years, and been in the alternative medicine or healing space for a long time, did acupuncture. That was probably, I would say, one of the more powerful ceremonial spaces that I've been in.
He holds a heavy stick for sure.
Yeah. I had this experience of a really large release, emotional release, psychosomatic release. I was, ever since then, I've been pondering on what that was coming, like, what did that come from? And I don't know if it matters to really try to place a label consciously on what that was from. I have an idea, but it showed me just the capacity to heal that this medicine has, that is unlike anything I've ever experienced. and I've mentioned it with like Emron on the episode that I did with him, the whole thing. But I mean, with Jonathan, that space, I had a realization. And the one thing I said from the first ceremony was that I felt that I had a mediumship ability that seems to be the case for almost everybody. Like some people say in the spiritual, even in like new age spirituality, that we're all mediums to some degree. Right. And the ceremonies that I was, that I've had, that I've experienced, I do feel like, especially with Jonathan, where, in Liquid Light, he has a chapter on mediumship, and, it did feel as if I was, embodying a different, like other maybe beings, spirits in certain ways. And then the second ceremony was where at the very end, I had that release that felt like a lot of grief, a lot of anxiety, fear was just let out. And I'm praying and setting the intention to continue that healing. But if there are remnants of that still holding on, to kind of really just go deep and look at what I need to let go of and what I need to look at. And but that was immense for me. And I mean, I remember you and a couple people. I love you guys. All of you were like, when in America, if a man cries and weeps, like I was weeping, and it felt so good, right? Like it felt good to weep. Like you're moving energy, and but in America, men will be like, they might look at you like you're weaker, or maybe with disdain if you're releasing those types of emotions. But you and Julian and Julian's cousin and Scott were all so supportive. And I remember, I think it was you were like, congratulations. Or no, maybe it was you came up to me and you had some kind of like, good for you. Like, I'm so happy for you. And then I think it was Julian's cousin who was like, dude, congratulations.
I know. I love when something like that happens and they say, good work, man. It's like,
and so the reason
you're crying, like, I didn't know I was doing a good job, because
the way to kind of describe that though, is that you are doing work for generations and for people around you, and not even just for yourself. It's like, if you and me and our friends within these ceremonies have children down the line, I believe those moments of weeping and moving emotional energy and releasing are moments that you may be allowing generational trauma to just finally to be looked at and to be acknowledged, and to say, okay, I'm not going to carry this anymore. I'm going to acknowledge it and then move forward, and not identify in life with those familial generational traumas that kind of hold on to each other, or like that have been holding on to me, and maybe past, like my parents and my grandparents. And that's why it's like, we say like, good work, congratulations, because I don't know if, people outside of these spaces really understand what's happening there. And it's immense when I look at it, but other people might say, oh, cool, you cried. It's like, no, it's bigger than that. Like you're going inside and doing deep therapeutic work in ways that are way beyond traditional talk therapy. I don't want to, throw shade on talk therapy, but it's all I can really, still to this day, I have trouble putting words to it, but it's this combination of mental and emotional and physiological feelings, and a lot is going on, but it brings to the surface what you need to acknowledge in ways that you probably are suppressing in your regular daily life by maybe distracting yourself and not really doing, paying attention as much. I still have trouble to this day outside of these spaces to like let my emotions flourish in ways that are still intelligent, but also healthy, right? You don't want to,
You don't want to wear your emotions like a badge of honor either.
Right. Right.
To answer your point.
Yeah.
And to your point about the crying thing, a man in America, the Western society, I mean, they could go 10 plus years without ever crying, maybe longer than that. Maybe they haven't cried since they were kids. So, I mean, I know that was the case for me. This past year, I've definitely cried a few times in ceremonies. Been incredible feelings. Great, great, great. Helped me so much, healed me so much. But, before that, I didn't cry for maybe 10 years. So when you share that and someone has that response to you, it's probably because they haven't done it before. They don't know how good it feels. They never had that type of release before. So.
Well, anyways, moving on. I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on from that retreat, but I'd love to hear more about, the path that you've been on in Brazil. Get into that. So,
so just learning the medicine ayahuasca in Brazil. Really. Yeah. So I'm, in Brazil because, of ayahuasca. I mean, to really study it, and, to have the exposure that you really only can in South America, right? Where the vine and the leaf are native, right? They grow naturally. It's legal in Brazil. Ayahuasca is legal. It was actually illegal for a little bit, or they tried to make it illegal in the 70s. And a lot of research was done on it. A lot of the communities like the Santo Daime came together to actually, take the government to court around ayahuasca. And they were able to show scientifically that it was improving, the lives individually and societally for the communities that were doing it.
Frozen again.
So I'm here in Brazil to study basically the medicine. And what that comes down to is, for me, is one lineage called the Santo Daime, which is probably the most popular lineage in the world. And then also indigenous as well.
Yeah. And so the Santo Daime, it's a relatively new spiritual tradition, right? So Maester Iranu was the
probably 1940, and then in the 40s, I believe.
40s, okay. And Master Iranu was the one that founded it, and what I've heard from also through reading how you've got the double crucero that is a symbol within their religion, and
I believe it's the Rosicrucian cross. It actually predates the Santo Daime, but yes.
Okay, that symbol, yeah. For them, though, it seems that they're invoking, what I've heard is Christ consciousness, or at least trying to bring Christ into their spaces when they're doing Daime works. And
absolutely, yeah.
They almost believe, or not almost, but I am aware that they believe this is the second coming of Christ. And,
which is a huge topic.
The big statement. That's it. Yeah.
Well, no, not just for the Santo Daime. I'm just talking about that concept in general, right? Because I don't know much about the Bible per se, but we've all seen people holding up their signs saying the second coming of Christ is next week, or other people talking about the second coming of Christ and really what that means, right? Does that mean Jesus himself is going to walk the earth again, or what does that mean, right? The Bible certainly talks about it, and really a lot of New Age spirituality talks about this as well. This ascension that's happening across the planet, right? That we're ascending into a different actually state of consciousness here in the next, whatever this period ends up being, right? Many religions believe this. Many different spiritual circles believe this. The mystery school that I was with was also speaking about this. And a lot of the spiritual community talks about this as well. They mention this word ascension, right? And so Christ consciousness, you can really think about that, because Christ consciousness, if you just want to put it simply, it's just heart intelligence, right? Living society through the heart collectively, right? I mean, that's what Christ consciousness is. As Jonathan says, you measure your devotion to Christ based on your love, right? I mean, it's just that simple. But we too often associate Christ with Jesus Christ, right? The man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago. And it's not necessarily the same thing, especially when people talk about Christ consciousness as well. Christ was a title in those days, right? So Jesus of Nazareth was they named him Jesus Christ because Christ was the sort of title of Christ consciousness. And so when you're talking about Christ consciousness, you're talking about a state of consciousness. You're not necessarily talking about Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a great conversation, is separating kind of Christ from Christianity, which I know we kind of talked about and something you've alluded to in your path right now, right? Walking the medicine and walking Christianity and really, as in your own words, trying to follow the messages of Christ and how that differs from Christianity, right? Because Christianity is really the anthropological, the societal kind of formations that happened after Jesus, was killed and passed away, right? And so I love that this conversation is becoming more, I don't know, I don't want to say every day. I don't think everyone's having this conversation, but it certainly is common. I mean, I see it, on Instagram and YouTube and things like that. Aaron Opke's been very, very big talking about that as well. And so that's something that you're actually exploring yourself is, we're living in a time where religious decline is happening in terms of people are just not necessarily inherently religious like they used to be, right? And so people are approaching religion with more of a scrutiny, right? Like you are, which is you're approaching this new religion, but you're not necessarily just blindly giving yourself over to it, right? You love the community, you love some of the lessons of the Bible, right? I mean, the book's been around for 2,000 years for a reason, right? It has some really, 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 unearthly wisdom in it, right? That everyone, can gain something from. And so, this Christ consciousness, I guess I'm trying to make it not to seem as abstract as, when someone talks about Christ consciousness, it seems so abstract, right? It seems like so multidimensional or something, mm-hmm. But it's really just humanity arriving at their heart. That's what it is, right? Can we actually start loving one another? Can we actually start treating each other like brothers and sisters? Can we actually finally start taking care of our planet, right? Can we actually have love for everyone and all beings, right? And find a way to exist within that state of mind rather than to live in a, Darwinian mindset, rather to live in, one person makes it and the rest don't, right? So that's really all it is to me, based on my kind of thoughts about this right now.
Yeah, I know. So there's this gentleman by the name of Jonathan Paju, I think he pronounces his name, and he's a man of Christ and has been in the Christian faith for some time, and he's been becoming more apparent online due to his conversations with Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson kind of made him more apparent because he has this ability to bring symbolism in Jesus and the Bible into a unique. He can talk about it in a unique way. And anyways, I remember him saying how he cringed when he would say Christ consciousness, because a lot of what I've seen, at least, and he didn't really elaborate too much. I just remember him cringing about it because he's pretty devoted to the Christian faith. Mm-hmm. And I've seen New Age spirituality bring up Christ consciousness. And it seems to me, based off of what I'm observing, it's like something to attain. It's like, let me get into Christ consciousness so I can get up to this higher level than, and I'm not saying they're saying they want to be, I mean, it could be this, but some people might be trying to attain that state of consciousness to be better or it's a form of spiritual materialism.
Yeah. Spiritual ego is a real thing.
Absolutely. And that's why I hesitate to say it nowadays, ever since I heard Jonathan Page kind of like push it away. Like, I don't like that, but I love what you said about how it's really just this heart intelligence and living your life, acting through the heart versus majority of
you could say like if you're living Christ's life and teachings, then you are aspiring for Christ consciousness, right? And you can describe it however way you want to, but that's fundamentally what it is.
Yeah.
Right. That's that's the way I would think about it. Right. That's why it's called Christ consciousness.
Right.
And it's very likely that the man who was Jesus is the one who brought that consciousness here, so it could be attainable for all of us. So yeah, one of my goals and why I think so much about this stuff is to make these sort of esoteric spiritual principles, very, very practical, very relatable, because, this is our lives at the end of the day, right? Our lives are inherently spiritual, and no one seems to know it, right? Because of just the nature of this human experience. I certainly didn't, right? My first 21 years of life, kind of like you, just didn't, never thought of it, right? Just living life, living for Friday, trying to, get a degree and, all those other things, right? You don't have time to think about a spiritual life, especially, when it's not a part of our society or social fabric. Because what I see a lot is I see a lot of people that's been traumatized by religion, who were religions, who maybe were religious as kids. And then by the time they're 12, they throw it away and don't ever want to think about God or anything like that again. Right. Unfortunately, I see that all the time. And so I was even, with this man, yesterday, last week, because the Santo Daime is a Christian faith. Right. And so it's, a lot of people have aversion to it here right now because of the Christianity, right? Because they associate it with, the other Christian church they were in. Right. And so I had my cross on and everything. And, he's like, oh, I can't do the Santo Daime because they're Christian. So, of course, he never had even walked in because of that. And, for whatever reason that he had these sort of thoughts about whatever happened to him, right? And if you look at the story of Christianity as well with the Crusaders and things like that, it's a religion that has had a lot of darkness in and of itself, and it's changed, right? This is something I saw this way. I thought it was hilarious. So in the United States, there's 200 different versions of Christianity. In the world, according to a couple people, over 40,000 versions of Christianity. Now, the thing about that is, if someone was teaching something and then there ended up being 40,000 different ways of this teaching, you would think that, we had completely lost the message, right? Because how could there be 40,000 different translations for what this man said, right? And that's just because people were filtering it through their own biases or preferences or whatever, right? So I think in a lot of ways we're rediscovering the Christianity we never tried, right? Because it was captured, 100 years after he died, they were already changing it. With the Roman Empire, when they started really messing with the Bible and everything like that. So, I love that we're approaching it in the way that we are now. And even a lot of, Christian churches, again, I don't go to them, but they seem to kind of be, less dogmatic about the Bible, right? And start talking more about, about the heart, about spirit, about these things, about Christ's life, right? That's why we're there anyway. That's why this was started in the first place, because this great man walked the earth 2,000 years ago, and to focus more about that and not the dogmas, not the rigidity and things like that. And you see that across, all these disciplines, yoga and stuff as well. We live in this time now where, people are just being a lot more independent in the way they think about things. So the issue with that is that, in my mind, it's not really it's obviously a choice, but it's not really a good choice not to have any faith. And so, a lot of people that are tired of religions or something like that, they end up kind of having no faith, right? Because it's a really deep search. We all being called to basically seek God for ourselves now, right? That's just kind of a part of this ascension. It's, Christ isn't in the Bible, Christ is in you, right? That's a big difference. And that didn't exist a couple hundred years ago, right? Because the priest had to be ordained, and then he was the one that could then kind of bless you and things like that, right? And now, as humanity is ascending, if you believe that, we are all being called, to be the priest. We are all being called to be the Christ. We're all being called to live from our hearts, and it's going to require a ton of change.
Yeah, some people, at least that I've spoken to, in the Bible that I have, definitely states that the Bible, the Bible is the Word, and the Word is God.
Yeah,
and Christ was God, right? So I mean, I'm still interpreting all of this, so I don't want to make any bold or.
And I'm just giving everyone my opinions. So
I'm not saying I'm right. I think that the Bible, with its historical accounts of bringing Jesus's words, can provide knowledge of how to operate. Like Jordan Peterson recognizes it as the perfect mode of being, and
Christ.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
Yeah, I like how he frames it that way. And I've got actually a tab pulled up. It's the biblical series that Jordan did like 7 years ago. It's been blowing my mind. I really like how he's interpreted it, and from a psychological evolutionary standard, all that stuff. And but yeah, I think one reason why I also I read this book called The Reason for God by Timothy Keller. He created this. He founded this church in New York City. It's a Presbyterian denomination. I don't even know the differences of all the denominations, but he has done a really spectacular job with speaking to atheism and materialism, and how the Bible will talk about false gods, and those false gods aren't necessarily like different deities. They can be your career.
Yeah, absolutely.
It talks about like being a parent is your everything, or even like your lover is your everything. And he did that in one chapter, and it really hit me hard. And it was bringing back that perfect mode of being. In order to have that perfect mode of being, you are aiming and orienting your awareness, your heart, and your mind towards God, versus all of these distractions. And the way that I've also heard people describe it is there are these other goods, right? Being a parent is a great thing. Having a lover, a romantic lover, life partner, marriage is a great thing. Your job, a fulfilling job, also a great thing. But when you make it the highest good, the supreme good, it can cause this fragility, and it puts so much pressure on having that, like, you essentially worship that one thing, and if it breaks, it is this finite value, right?
Impermanent, yeah, absolutely. You're worshiping something impermanent rather than worshiping something permanent,
right?
So I think that interpretation of false gods is exactly what that actually means, right? Don't worship anything other than me, and it's not meaning my one God. It's talking about faith in general, right?
Yeah,
be the God, right? Not money, not sex, not your wife.
Yeah. I think people get
other things, right?
Yeah.
Attention,
Yeah.
So
people push back on that. Like, don't worship anything but me. It seems to be like authoritarian or.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely reads that way, and that's why, you need the preacher, you need these communities to help kind of translate it, right? Because you can't read these things at face value. You can't read them immediately how you think about them. It takes time to really understand these things, and you need to cross-reference it with other books and things like that. It's so great the resources we have now makes it more available, because, again, if you read that the way it says, literally, that's what you would think authoritarianism, right? Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. So I want to get more into your, you've given like a general explanation of how you're studying in a way this medicine in ayahuasca, and you've found this mentor in Brazil that you've been participating in ceremonies, and you've also gone out into the jungle, into the Amazon. I'd love to hear more about that, how it started, how it was like prompted, and then it sounded like you legit went through, you had to take a boat to get to where you needed to get to, the tribe at least. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, man, it's, in some ways it's hard to describe because, I'm 100% in the unknown in a lot of the ways, right? So same thing with how I was listening to life last year about doing ayahuasca. I'm using those same skills now, just trying to walk the path that feels right for me, and just to feel opportunities, feel events, and go from there, right? Just walk the path, as they say. Yeah. So the Amazon opportunity opened up for me because the guy who I'm here learning from, his teacher, who is a shaman in the Amazon with a tribe called the Huni Queen, he was coming to the island where I'm staying at now, Florianopolis, to do some ceremonies. It's for him specifically and his family is the only way they can really make money, right? So he travels for a few months throughout Brazil, does ceremonies to help provide for his family, and while I was with him, he in the best Portuguese I could, right, which was not a lot at this point 2 months ago. When I moved to Brazil, I didn't know any Portuguese, so still very much trying every single day. I can somewhat communicate now, but far from conversational. And I told him, I said, look, this is why I'm in Brazil. So, I went up to this native shaman in Portuguese and said, this is what I'm here for. I left the United States to learn about this, blah, blah, blah. And he just says, well, you have to come to the Amazon. And my initial thought was, well, how the hell am I supposed to do that? Almost kind of mad at his response, because it's like, dude, like, I'm American. I don't know any English. I only know English. How am I going to go to the Amazon? I was actually, it was so obvious to him, but it was not obvious at all to me. And then, so I go, who, how, whatever. And he brings out his phone and, gives me a contact for somebody. And then actually, as I walk out of this ceremony, I meet this guy who was also planning on going to the Amazon in August. So, in that moment, really when I met that guy, I knew that I was going, because again, it was just kind of like this, I walk outside and this guy, I started talking to was like, yeah, I'm going next month. Do you want to go? And at that time I was sure I'll go, and again, because of, these, this intuition I've cultivated just by practice, I was like, it was just clear as day, like something I had to do or something I knew that, I was supposed to do. And so, after that happened, I got the date, I booked the flight, got all my gear and left, mid-August to go to stay with this tribe for 21 days. And it was beautiful. I mean, it's, what I love about practicing and learning from different lineages is kind of what we spoke to about the dogmatism about some of these things. Every single way has their own, every single path, right? In a lot of ways, these different lineages are their own religions, right? It's their own cosmology. They think about the world differently. And that's why I say I'm studying the medicine, because, there seems to be something above what these separate lineages are, right? From the Santo Daime to different indigenous cultures, right? They all do things a little bit different. Their songs are different. So it's really beautiful to see how each place's relationship with the medicine's different. But, thankfully they've been all true spiritual, places.
Mm-hmm. And can you describe this tribe that you met? Can you describe their beliefs and their?
Not really, because they have their own language. Yeah, right. So it's really no different, man. That's what I love about, it's all one at the end of the day. So they have this word for what they consider the one. They call it Yushibu, which is like everything, right? And what's so cool about their word for God is, and I just read this from other sources. I don't know what it literally translates to because I asked them and they don't even really know how to. It's so obvious to them, right? What is it? It's everything. Okay, because the way they see God is in everything. So what from other sources, what it actually translates is the thing that nothing is bigger than and nothing is smaller than. And it was like, that's what they would call God. And then they would say, that Yushibu is in everything. That's nothing new from, any other spiritual tradition. What is God? I mean, God is everything, right? Mm-hmm. God is you. It's me. It's this earth. It has to be in some way. So, and then past that, I don't know, because, Portuguese is their second language, right? So, and not all of them speak Portuguese that well, because they all have their own language. They're communicating in their own way. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, there's this term called Gnosticism. Have you ever heard of it? Mm-hmm. And I recently stumbled upon it through a book. I'm looking it up right now, actually. It's a lot of different, yeah. Okay, never mind. The Bible, or at least Gnosticism, I believe, thinks that God is like in you, like there's a part of God in you. And I'm pretty sure the Bible shows or pushes back against at least what Gnosticism believes. And I don't really know too much about Gnosticism but yeah, maybe we should just sidebar that. I don't even know if I could dive into that, but
yeah, man, you're still learning the Bible, man. It takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so this journey of yours. So you're back in Brazil now. In what part of Brazil?
Staying on an island called Florianopolis, which is not too far from Argentina. So I'm in the very, very southeast of Brazil.
Okay. What's next for you?
No idea.
That's where
that's been what I've been doing the past year or so. I definitely feel a shift happening to be more, I don't necessarily want to say vocal, but to start creating content, to start talking about these things more. That shift became clear to me actually, during the Amazon was actually when that shift happened. The first year I was really going on my own journey because I didn't know what ayahuasca was. I didn't know what the medicine was. I didn't know if it would end for me, and then I would just go back doing something else, right? So for that first year, it was really just, following my heart, following the guidance of the medicine, and was just following my own curiosity. Again, not knowing and probably not believing that it was actually going to be, a big pillar of my life. Because it is, it's very, very few people probably, make it become a big part of their lives, right? A lot of people, they might have 10 ceremonies over the course of their life, and that's that, right? So, I had to get a lot of ceremonies under my belt for me to believe that it was actually going to be a big part of my life moving forward. And so my next step is just to continue to be here in Brazil and continue just learning the songs and things like that, and just seeing where it goes. I would love to bring it back to the United States one day. Did you say I was breaking up? No.
You're good now. You're good.
I would love to bring it back to the United States one day. I think that's a long-term goal, but that's a 5-year plus plan. And obviously to keep looking at the climate around psychedelics in the United States, which, seems to be increasing. There's a few ayahuasca churches that are legal. As you know, the one in Oregon we went to is a legal church. So it just depends on the legal climate for it. But, my next step is just to be here in Brazil, talk a little bit more about the medicine around holistic health, and things like that.
Yeah, I love that, man. Yeah, I've been wondering where my path will go as well. I've been still making my income from a Bitcoin financial services company, and I'm feeling this this lack of life, lack of motivation. Seems to be a little bit more mundane for me, and I don't really see any. I'm not entirely sure if I want to not necessarily climb the hierarchy of the company. I just don't know if I see any further path with the company, and I'm questioning where my path will go. And these ceremonies coming up, I'm curious to see if there's a message about it. I mean, every time I've done ceremonies with Kevin,
that was my prayer going into last October, which why I'm interrupting and sharing you, because I think it's great, because it's exactly because I had left my job. I didn't know anything in my actual prayer. And I mean, I had one thing that I wanted to get out of that, whole experience, which is more or less tell me what the hell to do with my life. Mm-hmm. Because I was I've worked at 3 different jobs. I moved from Florida, New York, California to Austin, and was just like, I've tried a lot of different things, and there's nothing that still, puts my heart on fire. Right.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to share that, because that's exactly what I had. And I did not get the answer to it during that, but I did in the ways that I didn't know, but it actually wasn't directly addressed.
Wasn't directly.
Funnily enough. Yeah, well, I think that healing, that I did, right? Because it was like, it was answering my prayer, but by not telling me what it was, by clearing all my baggage out of the way. Because it looks like whatever it is that that thing that you're supposed to do, you can't, because you have all this resentment. You're afraid to fucking do anything, and you don't love yourself. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to live your dream if you don't have those things?
Yeah.
Right. So it was actually answering my prayer. But again, that's what's so beautiful about the medicine. It's a lot more intelligent than you, because it could tell me exactly what it is, that perhaps, sets my heart on fire or whatever. But if I had all that baggage, I couldn't do it anyways. Right. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't do it because of all that other stuff. So instead it cleaned out all of that. And then, the answers really are just now starting to come, a year later.
Yeah. And I feel there's a little bit more baggage that I could purify and, take a look at and let go of. And then we'll see what happens after this. And what I was saying before, and thank you for interjecting there, because I think that's a great thing to put forward, as well as maybe other specific intentions, but it's to see where my life goes and where I'm meant to go and where I'm meant to be. And every time I've done the medicine with Kevin, which is really 2 out of the 3 times, and now it's going to be 3 out of the 4 times, I always get this and I don't know if this is a part of the Mita Sour, like the experience, the visions that you're getting. That's really my egoic desires. And, I know that that's going to probably be a part of your journey in there. But there's this compelling vision to like move out to Costa Rica and to work with the medicine. And, Jay's moving out there, and, I've talked to Jay a couple of times about it, and he wants me to go out there, which is, I told him, that's an interesting move. It's a big move too. And I would need to like really look at different things, but, and contemplate on it. But there was a moment where I was thinking about helping in this, capacity that Jay is bringing forth with his men's retreats. Justin is helping with that, and being a partnership with that, and being a leader with bringing forth these men into these medicine retreats. And that sounds like something that, at one point it did really set my heart on fire. And now all of a sudden, that's kind of dropped away. And I've just been not going with emotions, but staying in Austin, and things have changed and evolved in a capacity where I know I want to bring forth a spiritual discipline and awareness towards it, and intention on a daily basis, and continue forward on that path. And just not so sure where it could go. So it'll be interesting to see what comes up in the near future. But yeah.
Stay with that prayer. Sounds like a good one to me.
Yeah, man.
So obviously that retreat's a good one to bring something like that to. And, I don't know if you've ever been that clear with this ask. I know you've always kind of danced around it since I've known you, but from my memory, I feel like you're actually ready, or you're actually wanting, an answer to this now. So.
Yeah. I think there's a combination of remnants of like cleaning out the baggage, the dirt, and then also maybe getting some clarity on what it is that I'm meant to do. Cause this podcast was a big part of my identity, and funny enough, like, Squatch transitioned to a new studio, or at least I might've told you that, but, they transitioned to a new owner. He tripled the prices, and it didn't really faze me. And I think 3, 4, 5, I would say like 5 months prior, I would have been like, I wouldn't say devastated, but I would have been really kind of upset. Like, oh, I can't do this Squatch experience anymore. And I think what that means is that the podcast was really a big part of my identity. And it felt like this path forward for me to start something entrepreneurially, and then build moving forward, whatever I want to build. And that still could be the case. I don't know, but I'm also at this point where, it's not everything, right? It's like, it's a fun and, fulfilling and constructive, experience. Right. But it's also not everything. And, so now it's like, I had this like sure entrepreneurial path I was going to go down. Like, this is what I'm doing. I got to keep going. And now I'm letting go a little bit, and taking some time to rest a little bit, and just not being so attached to it. And the timing has been nice. So, to be able to see what comes up and see what, where things will go.
That's great. That's great. Because last year you were definitely, still pushing the podcast hard at the retreat.
Yeah.
Right. So now that this has seemed to be something you're reevaluating, you now have potential space for something else. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. A lot of lessons learned.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you.
Thanks.
That's that's a great, it's just a great thing to look into, for that week, that part of you. And that's why I just wanted to share, because it was the same thing I did last year. So it's cool seeing you do it now.
Yeah, man. So I'm not sure what else you want to, where this conversation could go. If there's anything on your heart you want to continue to share. I know it looks like you're feeling the call to take what you've been learning and being more vocal about it. Because I know like you're not super active really at all on social media. You're on it. You're not really posting as much, and that's totally fine.
I don't.
Yeah,
I'm actually working on a YouTube video now.
I'm curious to see what whatever you want, wherever you want to take this, whatever direction you want to take this conversation. I'm happy to keep going. I got some more time, and I think you're frozen, so I'll wait a little bit more. Right now, the frozen image of you is just this big smile.
Well, brother,
He's back.
think the internet connection answered our question now. But yeah, dude, definitely don't want to force the conversation going. Just want to say I love you, man.
Love you too, dude.
Love that you're exploring your faith, exploring Christianity, exploring these topics, that you have on your heart the next couple of weeks. So, really happy to see you continuing to evolve, man. Always willing to discover things about yourself, always pushing yourself. So it's really inspirational, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, right back at you.
And your openness, your honesty, because it's something I struggle with, right? Talking about some of these things myself. Talking about ayahuasca for the first time was a huge deal for me personally. But you're not afraid just to be yourself, on Instagram or when you're talking about these things. So it's really inspiring, man. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, man. And I love how you're able to plunge through. I mean, I've already kind of said it in the beginning of this conversation, but how you can plunge through and follow your heart and what feels, what feels right for you to go, like what path. Sorry, it's echoing right now. So it's kind of distracting me. But yeah, man, I look forward to your path, watching you, and really love our conversations together, our friendship. And thank you for your words and trying to be truthful at the same time, like trying to describe and talk about something that's so difficult. And yeah, there is fear at times too, especially like going to church and speaking to people that are Christians and, they might have strong opinions about ayahuasca,
And both ways, right? You're going to go to the Christian churches, talk about ayahuasca. They're going to have strong opinions. And you're going to go to an ayahuasca circle, talk about Christianity, and they're going to say, oh, that's garbage.
Right.
And so that's the beauty of what you're doing is you literally are going to have to take things that serve you and discard the rest and discard what other people say. And then also realize why they said it, right? The people who talk about ayahuasca in Christian circles, 99% of them have never done it.
Yep.
When you go to an ayahuasca circle and you talk about Christianity, then they have that aversion to it because of something that happened in their past, obviously, right? And so you get to see that, and it's so valuable when you see those things as you're walking your own path of putting things together, as you really are finding community in these Christian churches. But then, ayahuasca is very important for your spiritual connection as well. Mm-hmm. And you have to kind of do those separately because they both are serving you in their own ways.
Right.
And that's really the true spiritual path. So,
yeah, very well said. So anyways, man, I'm really glad we were able to have this conversation despite the
hopefully it edits well. We'll see.
Ends well?
Edits well. We'll see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, the internet dropped out a few times, but I'll be able to figure
I
it
thought I
out.
picked right back up pretty good.
Yeah.
Dude, when
Yeah,
we drop the recording, bro, I'll play you my song I made today.
okay. Yeah, man. Yeah, I got to make my own original song. But I love you, dude. And thank you for jumping on here. You're the first repeat guest because every single guest has been someone different. So
Cool.
you're the first repeat guest. And
Can't believe it's been a year, brother. And we didn't even really know each other then.
yeah. I mean, we probably met maybe 2 months before.
Yeah, we met in May and we had the that podcast in July. So only a month or so, but we didn't really, we didn't. I don't think we hung out one-on-one prior to the podcast. We might have done it once, actually. We did it once.
Yeah. Well, we can do these types of conversations anytime you feel called to do it. Just text me like you did, and we can go down any conversation rabbit hole you'd like to, or just anything that's on your heart you can express. And but yeah, I'm excited for both of our unfoldings moving forward. And yeah, man, it's exciting to see your face again.